Hmm. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of Living Truth. Hi, John. So good to be with you yet again and exploring the incredible world that's opening up for us.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
We look so stiff today. Yeah. And you may be wondering, today is Sunday. We're pre-recording this version or episode today because John's going to be doing what he loves so much tomorrow, and that's teaching. So yeah, certainly moving into exploring into the depths of what has been surfacing for us. And I was just going through some of the notes that we've been taking over the last couple of weeks, and just my jaw is on the floor in terms of how exciting this stuff is. So I'm sure you're having the same experience as well.
I've been typing up stuff this morning, and it is quite amazing stuff.
Yep.
Very excited about it.
Yeah, me too. I was just thinking, that favorite video that you have that we need to find again, of the dude standing on the mountain, and I think it's entitled something about how things go viral. And I was just thinking about over the last few years how we kind of go into this small, and this is going to lead into our topic for today. We go into this small kind of isolated space of just being me, myself, out, particularly in the world of small business and micro businesses. And yet nothing can grow, nothing can expand when we're coming from that place of isolation of being on our own. And that requires, which is really leading into the topic that we are focusing on today, that requires a whole shift in our identity of who we see ourselves being. So I want to lead off this morning just in terms of linking where we've come from to where we are now. And that on the first 3 episodes that we've spoken about, we've spoken at length about the I am, how the I am manifests. We've spoken about our connection to the world. We've introduced a number of concepts around balancing in the I am. We've also spoken about these dialogues and why they matter. And so as we start to now drill deeper into some of the threads and seeds that have been planted in the first 3 episodes, and if you haven't missed them, just by the way, please, you can go to Facebook or you can go to our podcasts, which we will reference for you, and you can pick them up. So balancing the I am leads directly into our identity, and the identity shifting, certainly for me, and then I'm going to hand it over to you as well, is that being the Lone Ranger, having to do everything on my own, which is vested in my lower nature ego self, as opposed to the connection of being interconnected. And I know that you've got some terminology that you use to apply that too. And so, yeah, a really interesting topic for me. And again, John and I've mentioned that we talk about very similar things, sometimes with different labeling or different languaging. For me, my I am is manifested in my soul contract, and also in how I engage with consciousness, with my higher power, and aligning to that. And that is part of truth for me. And then it manifests into how do I live that truth. So, John, your take on identity.
So for me, identity, we have a central characteristic, central character, sorry. I often equate the I am to a 18-wheeler truck. I'm doing the typical man thing here. So I imagine a truck pulling a large trailer container, and that's us. It's our lives. The energy, the engine represents our beliefs. It represents our drive, our ambition. And the wheels, each wheel represents a role that I play in my life to keep this vehicle on the road. So each role has its own I am statement. So I am so John the son, or John the father, John the swimmer, John the author, so whichever.
Sorry,
whichever
John and I, we
identity.
just have to share the joke. And I mean, this is not about being blasphemous at all. But when we were talking about, when we were looking at the transcript from last week's session, John was talking about his roles, John the Son, John the Father. And then I said to him, John the Baptist. So that's what we're giggling about. Again, there's no blasphemy intended at all. It was just one of those beautiful, humorous moments that we had. And we need to, part of what we need to, which is a higher order gift, is to remember the love, the laughter in what we're doing. So as John comes back into his wheels on his truck, that's what our giggle is that we just have to share with you.
Yeah, no, I'm all with you on that one. No blasphemy intended, just it was an ironic moment. So each wheel has its own identity statement. Each identity, each I am statement is underpinned by values and beliefs. What do you believe about that value? So if I have, I'm John the Father, for example, I've got a whole load of belief systems around being a father. Am I a good father? Am I a bad father? Am I caring? Am I disciplined? Am I, exercising discipline? Am I, so each identity has its own host of beliefs. Each one has its own host of values, what's important to you. And then there's a whole range of skills that are attached to that identity, which then gives birth to the behavior. So for me, when we are talking about identity, I'm talking about a whole host of, it's an I am statement related to values and beliefs, which is related to the skills, which creates the behavior, which in your language at the top of the iceberg is what we see above the water. So that's what we see people do. What we see people do is driven by ultimately, right at the bottom of the iceberg is the identity statement. It starts with the I am statement.
So there's two levels of identity that we've spoken about. The one is that specific living identity, which is what you've been explaining. When we come back to living truths, we have the truth and we have living. And part of what you've been sharing now is around how we live the truth in the different roles that we take on, as in truth being a multifaceted tool. And then there's the higher order truth, and that's more our soul truth, our soul identity, where for me, that's a lot about how we come into unity, how we come into that collective consciousness, how we have a united identity, as opposed to that singular identity that you talk about when we're in our physical bodies. So it's, I guess, the easy way to put this through is the I, we language. Is that when I'm in my lower order singular identity, it's about I, me, myself, I. When I'm in the higher order identity, it's about we. And that for me is how we start to make sense of the fact that it's two sides to the same coin. It's spirit into matter, as we've spoken before. So it's very much around transcending the I, me language, which can lead to self-centeredness, into being more a part of a unified consciousness, I think is the best word that I can think of, or unified identity. Yep. What do you think?
I like it. It sounds good to me. Yeah, I agree. In terms of the lower order, as you're calling it, I call them the singular identities. So I have a relationship with somebody. That relationship is going to define a I am statement. So, relationship with my parents, each one individually. So I am a son to a mother, or I'm a son to a father. That creates the singularity of that relationship. And it is from my perspective. So that is the I, and it is probably more egocentrically, self-centered based. Where once I start getting into the we, I am we, it sounds weird to say, but like for example, I am happy is a spiritual identity that requires a lot more than just my involvement. It does require a decision on my behalf, but it does have a greater impact in terms of it's not just about my perspective. It is incorporating, the unity or the unison of everybody involved in that, in terms of that relationship. I liked what you ended off there with, is that it is about pulling from the spirit and making it manifest in this physical dimension. I believe we have, in essence, I talk about the two purposes, so each role, each identity has a purpose.
Yep.
And that purpose is then to make manifest what was in the spirit. So we have a general purpose and we have a specific purpose. The general purpose is the fact that we have to make manifest. We have to bring it out of the spirit. So that goes through the I am, through the values and beliefs, through the skills, through the behavior, and into the environment.
Yep.
And that is the I am happy, I am content, I am, peaceful, I am all of those. And I liked your explanation before we started this, just in terms of the spiritual gifting, that those identities are pulling from the spiritual gifts.
Yes.
And in my language, in that would be called the fruits of the spirit. No?
Yep.
But and making manifest in them.
Gifting fruits.
Yeah. You're producing, you are producing. So, yeah, it always comes back to the tree and the seed.
Absolutely. I think the one thing, and we've been seeding lots of seeds over the last 3 episodes. I think the one thing for me that comes through with what we're talking about now is a lot of people are coming out of the last 2 years of whatever's going on this planet, coming out with who am I? And that's a direct identity question. And again, it's a question on 2 levels. And sometimes the higher order, who am I, is a little bit more difficult and challenging to encapsulate, because it's more about being, whereas the lower order is a lot about doing and taking action. Now, the one thing that I actually did want to say before we get into the being and the doing part of it is that no matter which I am we're in, whether it's the I am with a small a, which is what I reference back to being in my ego, or whether I'm in my higher nature, which is the I am with a capital A, we are still having a ripple effect on those that are around us, on ourselves and on those around us. And again, we come back to that beautiful iceberg. If you don't like the results that you're achieving in your life right now, you need to have a look at which I am are you predominantly operating from, your ego state or your higher nature self.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yep. So who am I? And that's, that is really it's a question that's rolling off a lot of people's lips. The more I'm working, the more I go into the one-on-one spiritual counseling stuff, the more that is the question that's coming up. Who am I and what is my purpose?
Yeah, and I think especially coming off the back of your comment about what's going on in the world is, I think a lot of people, their I ams are very fixed, they're very rigid. And we've kind of come to this understanding that our identity is this fixed concrete thing that has no flexibility, no adaptability to it. And that is simply not true. Again, if I'm using the truck as the example, I can pull off wheels and put on wheels. And why would I pull off wheel? It gets a puncture or the tread wears out. So a roll sometimes runs out of its usefulness. And it's a case, the fluidity, the flow of the identities is that you're able to pluck that wheel off, put one on that better suits you.
I've got a great example of that that's actually happening in my own space right now. And that is, if I think of my role as a mother, being a mom of small children versus school-going children versus teenagers versus young adults, and now with my daughter getting married and really occupying her own space, my whole role and identity as a mom is shifting and changing. And people refer to it glibly as the empty nest. It's not about the empty nest at all. It's about a complete and utter recalibration in terms of who I am, because I've identified with that wheel that is the mother, versus, and I'm not, yes, I am, I will always be her mother, but she doesn't need mothering anymore. So the shift in the role, you're talking about punctures or changing the wheels, or the tread might be gone. The tread of me raising children, that tread is worn, it's gone. I don't need to raise children anymore. They're adults in their own right. So that for me is a very profound example of how the flexibility and adaptation in that identity, the lower identity of me as a mom, is shifting. Me as an employee, me as a breadwinner, me as running my own business on my own in a singular space versus working with a team. All of that requires the higher order gift of adaptability and flexibility.
Yep, I like that. And if you, what you were saying in terms of the iceberg, if you don't like the behavior that's being generated, go back to the identity.
Yes.
So the empty nest syndrome is the fact that you have not changed the identity. You've stuck with the same values and beliefs, which stuck with the same skills. You can't want to change nappies on a 25-year-old. They are not going to be happy with
Yeah, no, hello. Some real resistance there, eh?
Real resistance. That skill that you have for changing the nappy is creating a behavior that is not accommodating the other person.
Yeah, it's become redundant.
So if you are not, if you're not prepared to go back into the identity and say, do you know what, this wheel needs to be retreaded. It needs to look different. So you might still have the identity of I'm a mother, but the values and beliefs around that change, which inevitably means it's going to affect the skills, which inevitably means it's going to affect the behavior, which inevitably means it affects the environment, the actual physical manifestation of that.
Absolutely.
So it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think what we're opening up here is actually really, really interesting, given where we are in the world right now. And this is what you're actually seeing as John and I being flexible and adaptable with the conversations, just in case you thought.
This is not scripted.
It's not scripted.
Not going to script either.
No, because I think that there's some very real issues going on for people around identity right now. Not only the example that I've just used as a mother, but I've been retrenched. I'm no longer an employee. I've been made redundant at work, or I've been told to take early retirement, and I haven't put any plans in place to recalibrate what that means for me. You know, many people going into retirement think that that's the end of their life, not the beginning of something brand new. There's the end of a relationship or a marriage. And who am I without that appendage as in a partner when I've invested my complete identity in that person and lost the sense of who I truly am? And all of those things bring up the questions as to who am I? Why am I here? And, you know, each of those life events bring us to a point where we ask that question and where we're given the opportunity to recalibrate. Another one of our favorite words, to actually recalibrate into a new identity and form a new identity, because life is fluid. You and I were talking earlier on this week around the energy of the Taurus, which is a sacred geometry field, which looks like a donut with a hole in it, and the energy fields that keep rotating. And that's the energy of the universe. It continues to evolve, continues to grow, continues to flow. And are we then in alignment with that? Because that's, again, higher order I am. It's not about the lower nature. I like what you said about people getting stuck in their identities. And I think, one of those questions that needs to come up for you if you're watching, when you're watching, is where are you stuck? What identities are you stuck in? Because that's the start of unraveling that Gordian knot that gets us repeating the same old and expecting different result.
And start with asking, what is the result? You know, what behaviors are you identifying? And ask the question, what is that point of origin? What identity would create that? And is it an I am statement that you are happy to own? And if not, is it one that needs to be revamped or recalibrated?
Can we use our word? Can we use our word? Can we use our word?
Yes.
Our word dissolve.
We can dissolve it. If once you've recognized it and you know you can, I mean, there are times that you want to recalibrate that role. You know, we don't have to dissolve all of them. So like your role of mother, it's not one that you want to necessarily get rid of. You know, your children are still around. You still have the function of a mother. So you're recalibrating that one. But there are some of them that I want to dissolve. You know, I don't want that kind of outcome in my life anymore. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to just dissolve that one behavior. I want to dissolve all of the behaviors.
That identity.
All of the values, all of the beliefs that go around that identity. I want all of that gone. Yeah. And I want to, can we use another word?
Yeah.
I want to see the new identity. I want to take an identity and plant it and allow it to evolve, allow it to start developing its new beliefs, new values, new skills, that creates the behavior that I do want.
So to make
And
it
it's
tangible for
simple as
everybody,
asking-
no, sorry, John,
Say
just to
again?
make it tangible for everybody, give us an example of that.
So if for me at the moment, the one is around money. I had an identity that, money was dirty. It creates a lot of weakness in character. It turns people into, monumental, that middle of the donut thing, that hole
Yeah.
with us in front of it. You know, um, so as a result, for myself, anything as soon as it was creating the behavior that I was then avoiding the money. So that's not an identity that I want. It was not working for me.
So it was an identity of scarcity?
Identity of scarcity.
Okay.
And what that would then do, the identity would create the values and beliefs. So I had a whole load of beliefs around rich people. I had a whole load of values that wasn't necessarily a great thing, not important to me. I'm happy to have scarcity because it means I've got integrity.
Yeah.
Is that true? No, not really. So in terms of the behavior, the effect that it was having was money was not necessarily a consistent thing. It was like it was a bag with big holes in it, and money was just falling through. And I get there is a flow. We talk about money as a currency, but the flow is beneficial. Where when you've got holes in the bag, it just comes and goes, and it has no lasting effect. It has no benefit.
I relate. So I completely relate to where you're coming from in terms of that, and it's also, it goes back to a lot of the I am identities that were instilled in us as children in terms of, and it's again, there's no blame, shame here. It's unbundling the pattern. Where a lot of our generation, particularly our parents coming out of the Second World War or being impacted by the Second World War when things were scarce. And so we modeled a lot of our own, certainly a lot of my own values around and beliefs around money, similar to yours. One of my biggest things around money was, as my integrity, is that if I have a lot of money and I have a lot of wealth, I have to be inauthentic because I have to become like everybody. And that's we talk about perspective. Yeah. And part of the identity shift now is creating that enlightened perspective. So if we're moving from an identity of scarcity, what then is our enlightened perspective around money?
Before we get to the enlightened, what you want to do is you want to, in terms of the languaging that we were speaking, I got a hand movement going here, I apologize for that, is to dissolve that identity. dissolve the identity, dissolve the beliefs and values that are associated with it, and that then dissolves the behavior. And I want to see something that is more beneficial. And for me, money is the tool now. So now I'm taking on an identity to say, I'm a gifter, because the higher order is that money is a tool, and this is the belief system that is talking. So I am a gifter is the identity. What is the belief that goes around it? Money is a tool that enables me to empower other people. Money is a tool that enables me to gift people that are in need. Without it, I can't help those people.
Absolutely.
So as soon as I've got that belief system, there are certain skills that then come into play, which then the behavior puts me into the flow of being gifting and receiving. And I can't gift if I don't receive.
And what that takes is the opening of the heart, actually, because that's where we gift and receive from. We don't gift and receive from our mental bodies, because that's the one that will justify, rationalize, come up with every idea of why we should keep the old identity and not seed in a new one. And so for me, and as
big thing for me about the old identity.
Yeah. As we've been working through this stuff this last 2 weeks, what's really, really struck me is that the new identity is formulated in my heart. And it's the opening of that heart, because that's where our connection to source comes from, is in our heart. we globally talk about love on the planet. We need to be love. What does that mean? How does that translate? Yeah, at an identity level, I can calibrate with that energy, but is it translating? And that's, we used talking about money specifically. It's so misquoted. The biblical verse is the love of money is the root of all evil, and yet today it's being construed as money is the root of all evil. And
it's where I interpreted it.
Absolutely. And so our identity around loving God and not loving money is completely skewed and shifted. And for me, it really starts to come in. It's not just about money. It's all of the resources that God makes accessible to us when we are in enlightened perspective, that we then have access to, because we're aligning our identity with the abundance of the universe. So the spiritual gift that we have in terms of accessing resources is abundance. And coming from a space of, and an identity of abundance, not an identity of money, an identity of abundance.
Identity of abundance. And it's important that you're saying that, because the thing is with the old identity of around the money, the identity of scarcity it wasn't just creating the fruit of scarcity in money. It was creating the identity or creating the behavior, the result of scarcity in everything. So it boils down to scarcity in relationships. It boils down to, scarcity of love, scarcity of patience. Because if I can't receive, I can't give anything, because there's a scarcity. So now I want to hoard, I want to dam up. And you can see it in a lot of people. Instead of allowing the currency of whether it's gratitude, love, patience, money, allowing the currency to flow, what they do is they build dams. So as soon as there's a little bit coming in, they put up these dams, and that's where they're going to hoard. So again, whether that's in love, in patience, and you find often that people that are in that mode then isolate themselves from the rest of the world. They cut themselves off. At the moment, I'm dealing with a couple of business people that are doing that. They've got a little bit of money now. Instead of allowing the flow to go, the scarcity mentality is it. Right, let's dam it up. Let's protect ourselves.
There's a difference between flow and being frivolous as well. Just taking it to the other side, and all of a sudden we deviated into this conversation around money. But it's important because it comes back to the identity. And that is the frivolity of having no limits, of spending willy-nilly, of gambling, of all of those things. So the pendulum swing goes either way. Either I'm hoarding completely, or I'm being completely frivolous, as opposed to bringing it into the identity and the reframing of the identity, that when I'm in flow, there's limitless access to abundance, which is where the higher order principles of gifting and receiving come in.
The higher orders of receiving and gifting come in. I also want to say the identities then also reveal the truths. So a lot of people will say, and I want to come back to the money thing, I apologize, it helps explain the reality of the truth. So for me, the truth was in the identity of scarcity is that money changes people, or love changes people, or gratitude changes people. And I don't think that is true. I think money reveals people. Love will reveal people. Freedom does not change people. It reveals who they really are. Because once we get into the flow of things, the higher order identity is going to come out, whether it is a healthy one or an unhealthy one. The reality is we are going to be revealed for who we really are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So once the flow is happening, it's not a case of now I can go and gamble and be frivolous with the money. It is about recognizing I have a responsibility and revealing that responsibility. That truth is going to reveal a skill, being responsible, which is then going to reveal the higher level order.
It links very closely to what we were talking about in episode 3, and that was about balancing the I am. The receiving and the gifting, the ability to respond, all of those things are the things that bring us into balance, as opposed to the pendulum swinging from hoarding or being frivolous. And again, that can be as frivolous with friendships, frivolous with, it doesn't only have to come, it's not only about money. It's about the energy with which we connect with the gifts of abundance that is part of the universe. Yeah. And so our identity starts to shift around abundance. I am abundant. And in that field of abundance, that brings a whole new set of values, beliefs, values, intentions, aspirations, emotions, skills, and behaviors.
Yeah. And we have used money as the example in this, and it's not limited to money. It's limited to, or it's opened up to all of the identities. And I'm not saying that you must now go and create just the identity of abundance. That's not what this conversation is about.
No, absolutely.
The conversation is about recognizing roles and identities that no longer serve you, and that you dissolve those, and that you seed and allow to grow and evolve identities that are beneficial, that are going to give you the behavior that you are looking for. Look at yourself as the master of your identities. And I'm saying identities in plural because you don't just have one, you have many. Like the wheels on the truck. There's not just one wheel on the truck, there's many wheels on the truck. And you need to become the master of those identities. You need to stand in a place and say, I'm the one that's responsible. Let me take hold of those and create the identities that are beneficial to me, that are going to give me the results that I want. You become the master of your identities. And I know as we're saying this, a lot of people are saying, yes, changing your beliefs, changing your values, that's deep, hard, difficult work. And hang about, come back, come back and listen to these conversations. We're going to address those and how to do it in a flow, in peace, and definitely in grace.
So there is, absolutely. Those are more. You're going to hear us seeding new wording and new conversations as we're going along. But I think there's a very important part to link what you're saying about the different wheels of the truck and the different roles that we play. And that is the golden thread. And that golden thread is the higher order identity that allows us to be consistent in how we show up in each of the roles. So whether I'm talking to a checkout clerk in the supermarket, whether I'm talking to a pump jockey at the petrol station, whether I'm talking to a CEO, whether I'm talking to one of my children, anybody, how consistently am I showing up in my higher order self? And those where I'm not, it's going to show me very quickly where I need to grow and change and shift in terms of recalibrating back to my higher order truth. And I think that's the golden thread, is that identity of, as you call it, what a multiplicity of roles. But it's also the source of where we come from. And it's knowing that we are connected to source. And it's that golden thread of, it always brings to mind for me the golden rule of doing unto others as you would have them do unto you, no matter which role we're taking on in living our truth. Yeah. The truth is the golden thread.
Yeah, and for me, that golden thread, just saying the same thing, just my languaging is a bit different, is we started the conversation, I said we have a general purpose, where our general purpose is to pull out of the spirit and make manifest. We also have a specific purpose. And our specific purpose is to align our multiplicity, our many identities, in order to fulfill the function that we are here for, to fulfill our purpose.
Yeah.
So they're not just random roles.
No.
I don't need the role of, I can't think of one right now, a piano player, because that is not part of my purpose. I am selecting roles and identities that are specific to achieving my specific purpose. And if you don't know what your specific purpose is, then you need to connect with this lady over here, Angela, so that you can then connect you to your specific purpose.
I think what you're saying again here is really significant, in that the conversation around identity will also reveal to us what our specific gifts and talents are. Yeah. As you say, you're not a piano player, neither am I. There are many things I'm not. I'm not a great administrator, for example. And, one of the conversations that we've been having through this, as we've been unbundling and unpacking it for ourselves, is the fact that in our lower order, we take on those identities as our truth, and it's not our truth. They are a manifestation of our truth, but they're not our truth. And so, you know, I think I've mentioned this before. How many years I identified myself as a CEO, as a strategist, as a teacher, as a this, as a that, whatever label I want to put onto it. Yes, there are roles that are, there are roles I execute and tasks that I fulfill, but they're not my identity of who I am. And that's again coming back into, we get stuck, you mentioned earlier on, we get stuck in the fixed definition of who we are as the roles that we play, as opposed to the fluid, I am the soul inhabiting a physical body that happens to manifest in different ways. And I think that's, for me, is really where the keys start to come in.
I want to also, just before we round up here, is give one example. I've got a mate that he believes that his identity is he makes money for other people. So he sees himself as an employee. And in the industry that he's in the business that he's in, his role for that is actually coming to an end. So he's getting forced to go and seek work elsewhere, and he is seeking work elsewhere because he believes that he can only make money for other people. So I'm challenging him on his identity at the moment, and I'm asking the question, is that true? And what if you could make money for yourself? What would that look like? What would that feel like? What would make that important to you? What would that create for you? What would the benefits of that role be? What would the benefits of that identity produce in your life for you, for your family, and for your future?
And what beliefs does he have to dissolve and recede as a result of that?
And that's what makes us the master of our identities, is we can recognize what's not serving us, what's keeping us in a fixed, result, a fixed outcome, a fixed end, and say, well, that no longer serves us. Time to pull off that wheel, put on a new one. What does that look like for you? What are the values and beliefs around it? What are the skills?
And when we talk about the energies of flow, for me, it's about, and that's a whole nother conversation that matters that we're going to have in terms of living truth. Flow is all about being like the river. And the river will always find a way around obstacles in order to get to where it needs to in terms of outcome. So I have a few questions that I've written down, which I think we can turn into a worksheet. Which if you sign up on, we will still be putting some stuff out. John and I are talking about putting out a specific web page just for living truth. We're committing to do that, okay, just because we've announced it now. But I've got some questions, things like, what perspectives about how I see myself will I need to change and dissolve? What are the perspectives I would need to choose to reframe, adopt, or to see into a more empowered, beautiful version of me? How will that manifest in all areas of my life? And I'm not even going to give you the rest, because those are 3 questions that we'll post in the copy underneath the broadcast. There are more, so if you want to see more and explore more, you'll need to tune into next week's episode. And I think at this point we're probably going to be talking about purpose. We've got a nice lead into purpose from today's discussion. So I certainly hope that you found today valuable, and that it starts asking the questions and seeding the questions for you as to the answer on who are you? Who are you really? And who are you in your truth?
Love it.
And any closing comments from you, John?
And in seeding those, I love the way you phrase the questions in terms of what is your perspective. And it is, these identities are about perspective. And I think one of our most important roles that we need to adopt first, a perspective that we need to pick up, is that we are the master of those perspectives. We are the master of our identities, and we need to become creators of and co-creators with. So we ourselves create them, but we do co-create them with God. So you do need to become a co-creator. So pick up that one first, recognize you can, and then allow it to happen.
one thing a visual image that I'd like to leave with you as we bring this episode 4 to a close is, if you pick up a telescope, which lens are you looking through? The little dot that allows you to see a magnified version of yourself, or the small dot that allows you, the big dot that allows you to shrink into yourself. And that, again, we're going to be having lots and lots of discussions. Choice, one of them, it's all around a choice. What identities are you choosing, and what results are you getting as a result of the identities that you're choosing? So stick with John and I as we explore this incredible journey with absolute wonder and fascination, curiosity, and a whole lot of joy, which are all higher order aspects of the I am. And also just ponder a little while as to what impact are you having on your world. Because when we start to look at the kind of world we want to live in, it means that we're going to need to start making some different choices as to how we manifest our I am. And I think I'd like to leave it there for you today. And we will see you again next week. Thanks for being with us.